Hey guys, so finally here I am with the review of the Realme X7 Max. I used it as my primary phone for a couple of weeks soon after its launch. I've also made a comparison video of it with the iQOO 7 and the Mi 11X. Now, after that, I started testing relatively more affordable smartphones like the iQOO Z3 and the Mi 11 Lite, while currently I am using the OnePlus Nord CE, whose review should be out by the end of this week. Anyway, after using these cheaper phones, the one thing I've come to realize is that just by adding a little bit more cash, you can get the Realme X7 Max, which offers a much better experience overall. At a starting price of 27,000 Indian rupees, the Realme X7 Max is an incredible mid-range phone to buy. Here, the Realme X7 Max looks like any other mid-range phone, but I think the company has nailed it with the right set of hardware specs underneath, while also going aggressive with the pricing, which makes for an ideal combo. Regardless, let me talk about its design first, because I feel like this is one area where Realme has most certainly cut corners to keep the price down. The Realme X7 Max comes with a plastic build and therefore feels like you're holding a much cheaper device. However, its weight distribution and smaller form factor are the things that I've liked. Because of this, the entire smartphone experience when typing or holding it to view messages and such have been a comfy delight to my small hands. Thankfully, the big Dare to Leap branding that we saw on previous Realme phones is finally gone for good, although there is a tiny version of it right here. And for some reason, Realme thought that it would be cool and sort of a fashion statement to implement a dual texture finish where you get to see a matte sandstone texture on most parts while a vertical glossy strip runs across the camera module. Personally, I feel like they could have gone old school and implemented the Realme X or X2 Pro's design instead. Nevertheless, if you are buying this phone, a good skin or a good case should be your top priority. As for durability, it's a pretty rigid phone. The frames, despite being made of plastic, are firm and do not creak or bend when applying pressure. Yet, it only comes with splash resistance, so you're gonna have to be a little careful about using the phone around water since it does not get any kind of official IP rating. So yeah, the Realme X7 Max basically gets an average rating on the design front, but where it makes up for this mediocrity is with its awesome hardware, starting with its top quality screen. Comparing it with cheaper devices like the Nord CE or the Mi 11 Lite, it's a much better screen to look at. In fact, it is as good as the one on the Mi 11X and the iQOO 7, both of which cost more than the X7 Max. Here you get a 6.4 inches AMOLED panel with a 120Hz refresh rate and a 360Hz touch sampling rate. I used this phone in the 120Hz mode and found it to be incredibly responsive. Plus, I for one didn't notice any weird stutters or micro lags here either. And because of its 360Hz touch sampling rate, things like typing up messages have been a fluid and enjoyable experience so far. Sadly, Realme has included an average vibration motor, so the haptics is not as good as, say, the Mi 11X. Anyway, you're also getting a stereo speaker setup here, although it's not true stereo because the secondary speaker on top also acts as an earpiece. Nonetheless, it can get plenty loud with okay-ish dynamic range and details, but once again, it still does not compare against the expensive phones. Okay, coming back to the display, the colors are fairly accurate for the most part, although it is slightly on the cooler side. But you can always play with the color temperature settings and make it more pleasing to the eyes. Likewise, this screen can get fairly bright as well, while it obviously lags behind the best. So yeah, it is not a flagship grade screen, but for what it's worth, it is an excellent panel. On a different note, Realme has included an optical in-display fingerprint sensor here, which is fast and accurate. Likewise, I've got to applaud Realme for including a 3.5mm headphone jack on the Realme X7 Max, which comes as a big advantage to mobile gamers. Software-wise, for me, Realme UI 2.0 is ahead of Xiaomi's MIUI as it is lighter, near stock, and simply easier to use. Plus, things like dark mode are better optimized and work well here. However, the one area where Realme needs to improve is on faster updates. My unit is still on May's security patch while we're way into July by now. Also, the company has not explicitly mentioned if the Realme X7 Max will receive monthly or quarterly security updates, nor have they committed to how many years of Android updates this phone will receive. I wish Realme was a bit more transparent in this matter, just like how Samsung is, for instance. Okay, moving on to the performance side of things, this is another win for the phone. It is powered by MediaTek's flagship Dimensity 1200 chipset, which will also power the upcoming OnePlus Nord 2. So how good is the Dimensity 1200, you ask? Well, short answer, it is pretty darn good. In my usage, I did not face any lags and all the day-to-day tasks performed smoothly too. To compare, it is significantly faster than, say, the iQOO Z3 or the OnePlus Nord CE, and is comparable with the Snapdragon 870 powered phones, at least under normal usage. As for gaming, sad to say that the Realme X7 Max does not hold up against the likes of Mi 11X. In the latter, you can play PUBG Mobile with a stable 60 FPS in HDR graphics and extreme frame rates. However, the Realme X7 Max can only hit 60 FPS when dialing down graphics to smooth while keeping the frame rates to extreme. Likewise, it drops to 40 FPS after bumping graphics to HDR. Similarly, Genshin Impact can hit 60 FPS under high settings on the Mi 11X, whereas the X7 Max limits the FPS count to 50 in the same setting. Plus, it looks like the Dimensity 1200 is not optimized yet to run 120 FPS enabled games like Critical Ops and Shadowgun War games, as both of them are capped at 60 FPS. Regardless of the lower FPS, it still is a good performing phone. During the first 2 weeks of my usage, I did notice a bit of heating issue where the phone would get warm even when I'd be using light apps. However, that issue has now been solved. Still, the Realme X7 Max does get warm while you're gaming, but I wouldn't call it overheating or something that throttles the performance. Okay, moving on to the cameras, the Realme X7 Max scored good numbers when we compared it against the iQOO 7 and the Mi 11X. You can check out our detailed camera comparison of the three phones from a card somewhere here. To summarize, its 64 megapixel camera produces detailed daytime images with slightly boosted colors. It retains a good dynamic range most of the time and usually churns out an accurate white balance too. Overall, I am quite happy with the photography prowess of the phone during ample light. Here are some more samples for you to check out. As the sun goes down, the nighttime shots are not that great, but that's expected from a mid-range phone. It still maintains good exposure and details, although I think Realme has some work cut out for itself in terms of the night mode photos, as it does not improve upon the low light shots as you would want. Portraits, on the other hand, are quite decent too. It brings good exposure and a balanced skin tone with a good level of background blur. Usually, Xiaomi and iQOO phones struggle in terms of skin tone, but with Realme, I found it performing pretty well. That being said, the other two cameras completing the triple camera setup are pretty meh. Here, the 8 megapixel ultra wide angle camera yields washed out colors and photos look a little dark in comparison. It is also lacking when it comes to details, and overall the images are a hit or a miss. Similarly, close-up photos from the 2 megapixel macro camera are pretty much useless too. Okay, moving on, selfies taken from the Realme X7 Max are also pretty average, as the subject looks mostly soft and lacking in detail. It also introduces this reddish tint, thereby making the photos look a tad bit unnatural. On the videography side, the Realme X7 Max can record up to 4K 60 FPS footages. Yet, the overall video capability is below par. It is void of stabilization under 60 FPS mode altogether, and while the 4K 30 FPS videos come out fairly stable, colors are extremely oversaturated and unnatural here. To conclude, this is definitely not a good video camera phone. Okay, about the selfie videos, you only have the option to shoot at 1080p 30 FPS, and although the stabilization and the overall quality is good enough, I think the company should have provided a higher resolution option as well. Apart from that, as I said in my comparison video, the colors from the Realme X7 Max are relatively more natural than the Mi 11X and the iQOO 7. About the microphone quality, well, it's good enough. Now, making our way onto other aspects of this phone, its 4500 mAh battery usually gave me 5 hours of screen on time on my usage, which I would say is not stellar. But I put my phones to test quite rigorously by shooting a lot of photos and playing games whenever I'm free. So what my 5 hours of screen on time translates to is that this is enough endurance for an average user to last them through the end of the day. Realme also ships the phone with a 65-watt proprietary charger, which gets the battery fully charged in 55 minutes. As for the network connectivity, the good news here is that you're getting 7 5G bands with the Realme X7 Max, while most of its competition and even significantly expensive phones are offering only 1 or 2 5G bands. Overall, despite some obvious flaws with this phone like its plastic design, average ultra-wide-angle lens, and not so good videography ability, at 27,000 Indian rupees, it is difficult to beat what the Realme X7 Max is offering. So as I said earlier in this review, instead of getting phones like the OnePlus Nord CE, Mi 11 Lite or the Galaxy A52 for instance, I would recommend you go a little out of your budget and get the Realme X7 Max instead, as it offers you better performance, reliable primary camera and excellent display, which I think is worth paying extra. So that was all for our full review of the Realme X7 Max. Soon I will also be coming up with a review of the Nord CE, so stay tuned for that. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel, and thank you so very much for watching.